What happens when an iconic Hollywood figure who redefined tough sits across a panel of daytime TV hosts who seem ready for a rumble? You are about to witness a masterclass in holding your ground. Trust me, the moment the mask comes off in this interview, it's intense. Clint Eastwood, the man who built a career by staring down outlaws and doling out justice with a whisper, walked onto the set of The View, ready for what most assumed would be a standard press junket. However, this was not your average press stop. This was a head-on collision. Before we analyze the studio going silent, if you're not already a subscriber, hit that button now and let us know in the comments below. Can you think of any figure in Hollywood more intimidating than Clint Eastwood? The lights dimmed, the cameras began rolling, and the room was greeted by the warm smile of Whoopi Goldberg. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only, legendary Clint Eastwood. The crowd rose to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation as the icon settled into his chair, hands resting on his weathered lap, looking calm as ever. "Thanks for having me," he rasped with that unforgettable baritone, instantly taking over the room. Whoopi, maintaining the friendly vibe of a typical talk show interview, turned to Clint, inquiring about his new film and what brings a man of his caliber to new projects. "It's about second chances," he quietly explained. "Sometimes people deserve redemption even when the rest of the world has written them off as finished." But as the audience was mesmerized by his words, trouble was brewing less than 10 feet away. Can a person's past truly ever be separated from their craft? The first few minutes of the interview flowed beautifully, like a favorite scene being directed by a master craftsman. Sarah Haynes asked insightful questions that seemed genuinely touched by his quest for truth over Hollywood fantasy, and for several minutes, viewers got an intimate look into the mind of a genius. While the other hosts were engaged, Joy Behar sat quietly at the end of the table with a sharp smile on her face. She was not here for a friendly tribute. She was waiting. "Clint, can I ask you something?" Joy interrupted, and the atmosphere instantly changed. "You speak of truth and redemption, and I understand that. But can't the entirety of this message be viewed in opposition to the political commentary and alignments you've expressed over the years?" The studio went frigid, and although Whoopi tried to give her a warning look, it was too late. The match had been struck. Eastwood's famous narrow, piercing stare turned to Joy as his eyes narrowed to cinematic slits. Which comments would those be? Joy wasn't about to back down. Smiling sweetly, she quoted him saying he supported unnamed candidates, suggesting that by lending his name, he was indirectly supporting their platforms that may be diametrically opposed to the ideals he expressed. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably, and the air in the room had thickened with palpable tension. However, if Joy believed she could rattle the man with no name, she had clearly made a grave miscalculation. Eastwood leaned back in his chair, fixing Joy with that gaze that has scared off villains for generations. His steel edge was on full display live on network television. "Young lady," he stated, his voice dropping an octave, "I have been in this business since before you were born, and I have worked with people of every single color, credo, and political belief imaginable. I do not care what people are associated with or what political party they may belong to. I care about the character of the individual." In that moment, the room went beyond quiet. It was frozen. Clint Eastwood hadn't just answered a question, he had ended a conversation. Hollywood's toughest straight shooter had proved yet again that whether on the set or on the couch, he is always in control. "Young lady?" Joy's voice shot up an octave, and the room seemed to vibrate for a moment before imploding. "Excuse me, but I have every right to ask hard questions. And I have every right to disregard gotcha questions from people interested in a headline over a conversation," Eastwood replied, his voice remaining perfectly flat, but with all the threat of a .44 Magnum pointed directly at your heart. The room froze. Was a daytime television host really going to have a stare down with the man who basically invented the cinematic stare down? Joy's face had gone a shade of crimson, usually reserved for the deepest shame. "Journalism is not about being polite, Clint. It is about public statements." Eastwood responded with a sharp, humorless laugh that burned more than a shout. "We are calling this a public statement. Back in my day, journalists researched things. They did homework. What I am hearing here is an attempt to corner me." Whoopi Goldberg tried to mediate. "Can we try to talk about the film?" But Joy had gone over the cliff. She was unrelenting. She believed she had cornered Eastwood and gleefully produced a newspaper headline detailing his infamous empty chair interview and smirked. Was that not a little unhinged? A heavy silence descended upon the set. The crew collectively held its breath. Eastwood leaned forward, his voice dropping into that low growl. Joy, let me ask you something. How many movies have you made? What does that have to? Just answer the question. How many films have you directed? Produced? Starred in? Eastwood's eyes narrowed with the familiar spark that often preceded the line. Make my day. When Joy tried to evade by talking about her role as a talk show host and comedian, Eastwood pressed, And how many Academy Awards have you won? How many careers have you launched? How many stories have you told that actually changed someone's life? Joy's composure began to falter. I entertain millions of people every day on my show, she insisted, her voice faltering. Eastwood looked at her with cold, detached curiosity. Do you? Because from my perspective, your show seems like an ambush to gather ratings. Is that what we're calling entertainment? The air thickened with the scent of utter annihilation. Sarah Haynes threw him a lifeline. Clint, what is the most rewarding thing about your career? But Eastwood was far from done teaching his lesson. He looked at Sarah, but his words were for the entire room. The most rewarding thing is to work with professionals, Sarah. Professionals who understand that respect is earned, not demanded. In the world of Hollywood, there are stars. And then there are legends. As the set dissolved into a rather awkward commercial break, there was no question in anyone's mind who was wearing the badge. They didn't duck behind a panel of co-hosts and take cheap shots at their guest. Joy's mouth had fallen open, and the outrage was a physical force that knocked the air out of her lungs. Cheap shots? I am asking valid questions about your worldview. No, you are manufacturing viral fodder for your social media feed, he corrected, the sharp, cutting timbre of his voice slicing through her protestation like a knife. There is a huge difference between a legitimate question and a manufactured hit piece. I am not attempting to hit anybody, Joy shot back, her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. I am trying to do my job. Your job is to conduct an interview with your guest about their work, he responded, his calm, level gaze making her outrage look over the top, out of control, and absurd. I came here to talk about a film I believe in. A film about redemption. You, Joy? You only want to do battle with dramas and with divisive rhetoric. The room was so thick with rage that it was a challenge to breathe. Whoopi Goldberg desperately threw out an interview query concerning the film's protagonist. And, unfazed by their distraction, Eastwood kept going with the film's metaphor. He's a man who made mistakes, Eastwood continued, his steely gaze still fixed on Joy. But who is trying to fix them? And the biggest obstacles we have to overcome aren't always the ones that are out there in the world. They are the people who want to keep you defined by the things you once were, rather than who you are trying to be, and who you want to become. The point was made loud and clear. But in a room full of egos, who is going to give ground? Sarah Haynes, trying to patch up the gaping wounds inflicted by Eastwood's powerful metaphor, said that he was inspiring by speaking about redemption. And, unwilling to let a moment pass without a dig, Joy retorted, Speaking of redemption, don't you believe some people are beyond it? At what point do we quit throwing lifelines out to people who endorse politics that spread hatred and that pit us against each other? Eastwood's jaw tightened, a tiny sign that the legendary Eastwood temper was precariously teetering on the edge of explosion. Are we talking about the film I came to talk about, Joy? Or have we already decided to turn this back into a purely personal attack? I am talking about accountability, Joy barked back. Public figures need to be accountable for the message they are sending to their fans. And what responsibility do television's hosts have to their guests? Eastwood's voice had dropped, a quiet, dangerous sound that signaled to those watching that their hero had finished having his say. To ask them the tough questions, Joy screamed. No, Eastwood stated firmly. To treat your guests with common human decency, something you have clearly forgotten all about. The panel was utter bedlam. The other hosts were practically shrinking into the set as Whoopi frantically gestured at the producer to cut to commercial. And Joy, now a madwoman caught in a frenzy of her own rage, wouldn't be stopped. Human decency? Joy shrieked with an abrasive, jagged laugh. That is so rich coming from someone who has spent decades glorifying gun violence and playing mass murderers. The audience gasped, knowing that they had all just witnessed Joy make a cross-the-line moment from which there could be no return. Eastwood relaxed back into his seat, his cold eyes studying Joy with the detached interest of someone examining an insect under a microscope. "You know what your problem is, Joy?" "Please, enlightenment me," she sneered. "You think that being loud makes you right, and confrontational makes you brave. The reality is it just makes you a bully hiding behind a microphone." "Excuse me?" Joy's voice rose to a pitch that had the first 3 rows wincing, and through her madness, Eastwood remained a steadfast, centered anchor. "You heard me," he continued. "You're on your high horse sitting day in and day out attacking your guest because he has no other choice but to sit there and be polite in your house. You think that that makes you powerful? That's pitiful. You are so pathetic." "How dare you call me small?" Joy jumped up, her face scarlet. "I have been doing this for decades. I've interviewed presidents, prime ministers, the biggest stars in the world." "And how many of them?" Eastwood's voice cut through her anger like a refreshing breeze. "Left this stage having been treated with the slightest shred of respect? How many walked away from this segment thinking they just had a conversation?" Joy was gasping. "I don't have to take this from you. Not from you, and certainly not from anyone else." "You're absolutely right," Eastwood agreed with a shockingly placid nod. "You don't have to take a single thing from me, just like I don't have to stand here and let you make a talk about art into a one-woman political rally." The studio itself seemed to be buzzing, and Whoopi Goldberg found her voice through her disbelief. "Clint, Joy, perhaps we all just need to take a breath." But the legend wasn't stopping there. Is this the end of the interview? Or the beginning of a legendary exit? "No, Whoopi," Eastwood stated as he got to his feet, slowly and deliberately like an old gunslinger in a Western movie. "I think Joy and I perfectly understand each other at this point." Joy was practically trembling. "You can't just walk off an interview just because you don't like the questions." "Watch me," Eastwood replied as he honed his iconic gaze, the 1,000-yard stare. "I came on this show as a professional to discuss something that is dear to me, and I never agreed to let you use me as a punching bag for an afternoon." "But this is live television," Joy screeched. "You can't just leave." "Oh, really?" Eastwood inquired as he already began to unclip his microphone. "You know, Joy, that's another thing you have a very firm grasp of. The concept of power. Power isn't something you wield over someone else by cornering them in front of a camera. Rather, it's the power of knowing when it's time to walk away." Realizing that she was losing control of the narrative, Joy reached for the one thing she had left her audience. "If you leave right now, you'll look like you can't handle a tough question." Eastwood stopped. He looked directly into the lens of the camera, speaking to the audience of millions. "Folks," he said clearly and sincerely, "I came here to discuss a film that matters to me. Instead, I was ambushed by a person more concerned with the virality of the segment than an actual conversation. If that doesn't give you an indication of where television is going today, I don't know what will." He turned back to the panel. "And regarding the tough questions, lady, I've been fielding them since long before you knew what a microphone was, and what's more, they were typically asked by professionals." The room went cold. Still, Joy Behar was not finished. She crossed the line of no return. "You arrogant has-been!" Joy shrieked as the statement reverberated through the air like a slap. "You think you can come onto my show and insult me?" The studio fell completely silent. The crew froze. The other hosts stood in stunned silence, eyes wide as they fully understood the significance of her words. Eastwood slowly turned to face her again, and at that moment, he wasn't merely a director. He was the epitome of every hero, outlaw, and lawman that he had ever played. Cool, dangerous, and final. "Has been," Eastwood repeated with his calm, measured tone that echoed through the silence. "Now that's interesting, coming from a woman whose only accomplishment to date is sitting at a table, chattering about other people's achievements." The sting was so great that you would have thought the air had been evacuated from the room. A pin could have dropped, and it still would not have been heard over the immense, palpable tension. Eastwood's expression never changed, but his energy seemed to crackle with the force of a lightning bolt. "You know, Joy," he whispered, a sound that was more terrifying than any scream. "I've been called a great many things throughout my career, but for the most part, I've been called by people that are actually somebody themselves. Joy realized that she had jumped off a cliff, but her pride prevented her from reaching for an offered hand. "I have accomplished a great deal of things, thank you very much." "Have you?" Eastwood whispered, leaning into her space one more time. "Have you really?" "Let's see now. How many guests have you belittled over the years? How many fake controversies have you manufactured? How many interviews, which could have really meant something to the viewers, have you torpedoed? I'm asking the questions that need to be asked." Joy shouted, her voice wobbling only slightly on the latter half, exposing the desperation beneath her defiance, the need to maintain her relevance. "No," Eastwood answered, his voice calm and level as he stared her down. "You're asking the questions that gain you attention. There's a gargantuan canyon between journalism and performance art, Joy, and it is quite apparent that you seem to have lost your way and have landed somewhere in the latter field." There was a palpable tension now, one that would either be resolved or utterly consume them. Whoopi Goldberg made a last-ditch effort to regain some control. "Clint, perhaps we could all move on." "Joy, if you'll just give an apology, we can return to the film." Joy shot Whoopi a look of sheer disbelief. "Apologize? For what? Doing my job?" "Your job is meant to be enlightening and entertaining to your audience," Eastwood interjected, "not ambushing them for sport." "I wasn't attacking you," Joy pleaded, her voice beginning to thin. Eastwood gave a short, dry laugh that sent a shiver through the room. "Lady, I have seen actual combat. I know what an attack looks like. However, back in the army when someone attacked me, at least they looked me in the eye. They didn't use the comfort of a daytime TV show. The panel was deathly silent. Sarah Haynes wished she could melt into the floorboards, and the audience was shuffling with pure discomfort. The legendary tough guy wasn't performing a role. He lived it, and he'd had enough. "You think you're so tough?" Joy finally wailed, her voice cracking at the edges. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Eastwood. This is my house. These are my rules. If you don't like it then, you can leave." Eastwood smiled that chilling, predator-like smile of his, one the cameras had never before captured. "Your house. Your rules. You know what, Joy? You are absolutely right. This is your house, and that is precisely the problem. In your house, guests get cornered, disagreement is taken as a personal insult, and sensationalism is given more credence than fact. Congratulations on having built a monument." Joy was vibrating now, words failing her. "If you think you can waltz in here and preach to me about television—" "I'm not preaching to you about television," Eastwood interrupted. "I'm telling you that you are not actually working in television, but in a circus where you, as head clown, entertain with childish, nonsensical actions." A collective gasp rose from the audience. Never in the history of daytime television had such a cruel, deliberate blow been dealt to a sitting host. "How dare you!" Joy shrieked, dropping all pretense of decorum. "How dare you come on my show and disrespect me like that? Your show!" Eastwood glanced at the women across from him. "Odd. I thought this was supposed to be a panel show with a team of co-hosts. Turns out it's a Joy Behar ego hour with some backup singers." Whoopi finally grew a backbone. "Clint, that's enough. Joy, you need to calm yourself down now." But Joy had gone too far. "I am not going to calm myself down. This man comes here acting all superior and expects to verbally abuse me on national television." "The only person demonstrating disrespect here," Eastwood said, his voice dropping back to that terrifying, calm whisper, "is you. The minute I entered, you weren't here for discussion. You were here for blood sport." "I was doing my job," Joy repeated, but the words had lost all their impact. They had the hollow, cracked sound of a bell that's fallen on a stone floor in the quiet of the studio. "No," Eastwood said, his head shaking with a slow, heavy finality. "Your job would be asking about the work, or the process, or at least something even vaguely connected with what it is that the craft does. Your job would be to ensure the viewers at home walk away with something useful, something to think about." He gestured with his chin to the glaring red lights of the cameras, aimed in her direction. "You, on the other hand, have spent the last 20 minutes trying to humiliate a guest that showed up in good faith, and succeeded only in humiliating yourself and the whole show." Joy scanned the faces around the table, searching for an accomplice, a nod of support, a flicker of solidarity, but the panel were all armed with an impenetrable silence. The other hosts studiously avoided her eyes, and even the production assistants lurking in the dimness shook their heads at her. The studio audience had changed. and Joy Behar was stranded on a desolate island. "Fine," she whispered, her voice finally giving way and cracking. "If you can't handle real questions, maybe you shouldn't do interviews at all." Eastwood, who was already beginning to unpin the small microphone from his lapel, stopped. He turned back around, a glint of danger in his eyes. "Real questions? You want to know what a real question sounds like, Joy?" He locked eyes directly with the lens of the nearest camera, bypassing studio and viewer entirely. A real question would be, what inspires a man at 95 to continue creating? A real question would be, what advice do you have for the next generation of storytellers? A real question would be, what story are you most proud of telling? He turned back to Joy. His voice dropped to a low whisper that felt like the slam of a judge's gavel. "These require actually caring about the answers, Joy, and you don't." The resulting silence was deafening. The only sounds in the room were the hum of the air conditioning and the ragged breathing of the cameraman. For the first time in her professional life, the woman who always had a sharp retort had none. "You know what the saddest thing is here?" Eastwood said, his voice taking on a new, disquieting softness that made it even more damaging. "You had an opportunity to engage in a meaningful conversation with a man who has witnessed decades of American history, and instead you chose to play gotcha, like an amateur blogger looking for a headline." He placed his microphone carefully on the table. The sharp click echoed in the room. "This is an insult not only to me but to your audience." "Don't you dare lecture me," Joy shrieked, abandoning all pretense of decorum. "I've been connecting with viewers for decades." "Have you?" Eastwood asked, his composure unwavering. "Or have you been yelling at them for decades? Because there's a fine distinction between connecting and noise." Behind the scenes, pandemonium had broken out. Producers frantically motioned with their hands, trying to find a way to stop a live broadcast from exploding on air. But it was too late. "Security!" Joy screamed, her voice rising to a shrill shriek. "Security! I want security!" Eastwood paused, and for the first time since the broadcast began, he laughed. A deep, honest, rib-shaking laugh. "Security?" he repeated, his eyes sweeping over Joy. "Lady, what's security going to do? Protect you from the truth? What are they going to do, Joy? Arrest me for saying I don't think you're tough?" Clint scanned the room one last time, taking in the gobsmacked expressions of the crew and a shell-shocked audience. "I have been in the movie business for over 60 years. I have worked with the best directors, finest actors, best crews in the world, and there's no one who ever had anyone like you." "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Joy retorted, her sarcasm a fragile shield to hide her complete lack of control. "Take it like you want," Eastwood said without batting an eye. "But I just want to say to you, people here and out there, they're going to be talking about this all day tomorrow, but they won't be talking about your tough questions and your investigative journalism. They'll be talking about how you really choked on live television, right in front of the whole country." And with that final, devastating punch, the legend didn't turn back. Was this the most epic exit in the history of the small screen? The camera focused on Clint Eastwood as he calmly, purposefully strode toward the studio exit. He walked with the grace and composure of a legend as his hosts sat frozen, and a humiliated Joy Behar remained stunned by his final blow. The studio doors swung shut behind the movie icon, and the final shot on the screen showed the damage left behind. Joy Behar red with fury and mortification, the rest of her co-hosts sitting in a dead, heavy silence. They had all just been part of television history, the wrong way around. And there you have it, folks. An interview that started out to be a standard promotional appearance turned into an explosive, unprecedented confrontation. Clint Eastwood proved at the age of 91 that he is still the fastest draw in Hollywood. It's just that this time his weapon was a sharp tongue, and every shot hit its mark. Do you agree with Clint Eastwood's walkout, or did Joy have a point? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and if you want to be kept in the loop about Hollywood's most dramatic encounters, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Thanks for watching.